It's time now for another edition of Pats from the Past podcast. Matt Smith, Paul Perillo, and pleased to be joined by former Patriot quarterback Brian Hoyer. Brian, thanks for coming by, man.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Yeah.
We asked this of everybody, so I think people who are football fans, Patriot fans know, is Brian going to play? Is Brian not going to play? What's going on with Brian Hoyer these days?
I mean, I don't know. I think it would take a great opportunity to come along for me to do that. Obviously, I was in Las Vegas last year. I know I can still play because I beat the Patriots last year. One of the most
touché.
One of the most
That's on my list, Brian.
One of the
That's
most
on my
bittersweet moments of my career. So we'll talk about that later. But so I know I can still physically do it. But at 38 years old, my kids are getting older. I think it would take a really great opportunity for me, to come along for me to kind of look and see. But so I know I can still do it. Body feels relatively healthy, and so we'll see. It's always open. People always say, if someone's offering you an opportunity to play and you feel like you could do it, I remember a former teammate saying, "Play till they tell you can't." So definitely capable of it. It's just got to be, I think, the right opportunity at this point.
Idiots like us sit there and he can play or it's time to go and everything like that. But I don't think the lay people realize what's it like to make that decision as a family.
Yeah.
When you have a wife who's supported you cross-country trips, taking kids back and forth, at some point in time, her decision or her opinion, while always valued,
Yep.
you got to really listen to. That's got to be hard, like as a family standpoint. Like, at what point in time do I need to devote my time to them?
Right, and that's a huge part of the decision making. So that's why I say it'd have to be the right opportunity and all those things because, deciding to go to play in Las Vegas last year, it was not an easy choice. It was an easy choice because it was Josh and my relationship with him, but it wasn't an easy choice in the regards of what does this mean for my family? And thankfully, we had a great school here that allowed our kids to kind of virtual school with the help of a tutor out there. But it was rough. It was a rough transition, and they were all happy to come back once the season was over. And so now my son, he's going into 7th grade. He got accepted as a Zavarian brother. So, those are all things that you have to take into account. Like, I want to watch him play football.
Of course.
He's watched me play for a long time, so maybe it's time,
cool.
For a role reversal.
That's great.
When you came out of Michigan State, I mean, you didn't get drafted.
Yep.
And I don't know what your expectations were heading in, but to then have a 15-year career off of that. What were your expectations sort of when you arrived here in 2009? What were you hoping for?
I was just talking about this with my son the other day, and I said, listen, when I didn't get drafted, I kind of thought, okay, the Patriots are going to sign me. I'll learn from Tom Brady. Obviously, I watched Bill coach in Cleveland, so I always kind of had an affinity to him, and obviously him being a great coach, I thought it was a great opportunity to go learn, and I thought, maybe I'll make the practice squad. If I get released, at least I'll learn from these guys, and then sure enough, I kind of worked my way up the ranks and ended up being Tom's backup my rookie year. And, the things that I learned in those first 4 years were so invaluable to me that when I finally got some opportunities to play, you put those in motion and then you just keep stacking years. And the thing about the quarterback position is if you're relatively competent and you're a good guy and you make some connections, you just extend your career. That's, when I look at last year, if Josh isn't the head coach in Las Vegas last year, then, maybe my career ends there. But, luckily for me, I've met a lot of great coaches, played with a lot of great players, and made a lot of great connections, which allowed me to do that.
That's a little bit unorthodox, Brian. As a rookie, now you're backing up Brady, who, by the way, is coming off a knee surgery at that point in time.
Yep.
And you're the only backup quarterback your rookie year. That was the same way in 2010. You're the only backup quarterback. Like, not a lot of teams did that. What was your thought process in that? Like, you want to talk about literally next man up and you're one pitch away.
Yeah.
You're one pitch away at that point in time.
I think I was too naive to even understand that at that point. Now looking back, when you realize like Tom's coming off a major knee reconstruction, had, some hiccups along the way, man, if I had to play that year, I don't know how ready I would have been. Obviously, Bill believed in me and Bill O'Brien believed in me. And so I'm sure it would have, worked itself out. We had a really good team, so I think I would have relied on those guys around me. But, at that point, I was just thrilled to be an NFL football player, and now I'm going to a meeting room every day with Tom Brady and soaking up what I can learn from him. And then, that went for 4 years, and then until I got released in 2012. So, those years, those are kind of like the years you're building your foundation of your career, and I couldn't have done it in a better place.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that rookie season. You were part of some really good teams, and ultimately you were part of a champion in 18. But you had that great year in 2010. 2011, you go to the Super Bowl. In 2009, you probably didn't recognize it at the time. It's your rookie year.
Yeah.
But do you kind of look back and say that there was a little bit of something amiss in 2009? That's sort of the way it's kind of viewed here. That was kind of a reset year. And we're very spoiled because we've been part of a lot of good.
Well, I didn't know any better.
So
I'm from Cleveland,
10-6 going to the playoffs and all that stuff is not.
I thought
really
it was
a bad
great. I'm
year.
like, man, I'm on a great team.
But did you sense any sort of dysfunction at the time, or maybe looking back at it, do you feel like that wasn't the same as some of the better teams that you were on?
Definitely wasn't the same. I think looking back now, knowing what I know and being on some great teams, it wasn't. There was definitely some learning curve. There was some adjusting to new. I mean, that was Bill O'Brien's first year as a coordinator here. So now I know how important that is, being a quarterback when you're learning, even if you're keeping somewhat of the system intact, you're working with someone new. And that was, so those were kind of, I guess you call growing pains. But I thought man, we're going to the playoffs. I'm on the Patriots. This is like a Super Bowl organization. Okay, 1 year, we didn't win the Super Bowl, and I'm like, oh, we'll win it next year. I mean, I think that's kind of the expectation you have when you come into that organization. And I've always said this. I've always looked at it when Tom Brady was the quarterback. I never went into a game thinking we're not going to win, ever. There was never. And
Neither did we.
I've been on other teams, whether I was the quarterback or someone else is the quarterback, and I'm like, man, I don't know how much of a chance we have this Sunday. And I can honestly say every game that I ever played here, backing Tom up, that there was I never had that feeling, and obviously a lot of other players around that. But when I talk to a lot of my old teammates, I think that feeling was very similar.
Yeah, I bring it up because it's again. That's why I preface it by saying we're spoiled. When that's considered a quote unquote down year,
Right.
But Bill infamously said on that documentary, "I just can't get these guys to play the way
I was playing in that game
at the time."
Tom
was standing next to him, and you're out there.
We got crushed by New Orleans.
And
I remember thinking to myself, wow, I'm playing in a Monday Night Football game. Okay, one bad game, we got crushed, but I'm playing in a Monday Night Football game.
Sure.
This is pretty cool. And you see that, and you realize, and then having been on a champion team and teams that went to Super Bowls, you realize we probably didn't have a chance to go to the Super Bowl that year.
Right, and then you have that off season, which I think is a very sort of important off season.
Yep.
Kind of springboards the second run of the dynasty.
For sure.
You get Devin.
Yep.
You get Gronk. You get Aaron Hernandez.
Yeah.
Did you sort of sense wow, we're going to be a lot better as you sort of get into training camp in 2010?
I think what I realized, going into my second year as a pro is wow, we added these two tight ends. You add Devin, who, clearly was a great player right off the bat. I mean, he's returning kickoffs for touchdowns, a first round pick. You added, and those are, I'm just as young as them. So it's kind of wow, we got some really good players. We had Chung the year that I came.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Julian was coming, kind of creating his way. And I mean, look, whether it was being naive or I thought I was on the greatest team with the greatest quarterback and the greatest coach. I'm like,
you were.
I was. And,
you were.
And looking back, I understand, you guys say you're spoiled, but there was kind of a lull in the action. And having watching the dynasty myself, I didn't do a ton of research on the Patriots, what was before I came. But it was kind of cool for me to see, what happened, prior to when I was here, and then kind of see the years that I was here, my first stint, and then it kind of ends with my second stint here as kind of the end of that show. But it was kind of cool to see some of the stuff that I didn't experience, to see, Ty Law getting interviewed and kind of making fun of Tom and see these guys and Nugent and stuff. And so for me, that was kind of cool to kind of see the part that I didn't really live.
Right. You were 14-2 your second year.
Right.
Tom was the MVP. The backup quarterback's job is to always be ready because you're one snap away, one play away.
Yep.
And I assume, but I want to ask you, you prepared as such. I need to be ready to go. Was there ever anything in your mind, and I understand he's coming off major surgery, knee reconstruction. Was there ever time you go, this guy's not missing any snaps?
Well, there was
and you know what? They're going to have to drag.
Yes.
The bone's going to have to be visible
Yep.
in order for me to get in unless there's a blow, because he's not missing snaps.
Yeah, there was a game my rookie year down in Miami, and on Friday practice, I'll never forget this. On Friday practice, we're winding down. There might be one offensive period left in practice, and Isaiah Stanback was playing scout team gunner, and he's coming down the sideline, and he was a kind of a quarterback / receiver.
Yeah.
And Tom's kind of messing around, goes to grab him. His finger gets caught in his jersey, and he breaks his middle finger on Friday with 1 period to go in practice. And I'm like, oh, God, like, I'm going to play this. I haven't practiced all week.
This is his throwing hand.
This is his throwing hand, and I'm going to have to play in this game. He broke his middle finger. And so, of course, he goes and he sees Alex, and Alex is working his magic, and he gets I'm pretty sure he got like a block, like a injection to block so he wouldn't feel it. He's like, if I don't feel it, my body will just naturally do what it does. And he throws for like 340 yards.
Did you know this
I
story?
had no idea.
Well, I think everyone knew because he had to be added to the injury report. And people were like, oh, what is it? Well, his middle finger was broken.
Right.
And as a rookie, like I'm nervous because it'd be one thing if you get a whole week of practice and you're going to play. It's literally like I got like the last drive of practice on Friday. And then it was like a constant monitoring process of like, where's he at? And I was at BC the other day with Bill O'Brien watching practice, and we were talking about this story. I'm like, he's like, remember we were going over the call sheet and Alex is just like working on his finger. And I mean, that was the point I realized, like, this guy is, I mean, for all we know about him as a great player, the toughness factor, I mean, the things that I saw him play through and the toughness was, I mean, it's incredible. You could do a whole documentary on that.
Well, talk about, like Paul saying, we're spoiled. I think one of the things that we, loosely associated with the organization and fans take for granted is it's the line about availability.
Right.
And better than anybody, If you're available to play, you play. Mm-hmm. If you can't, you're sort of discarded.
Yeah.
And you're out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
And I think the fact that he towed the line every single week, regardless of what's going on, great player and everything like that. But I think that gets overlooked a lot of times when you talk about him. Is that he stepped up. He was there. He's ready to go.
In all the years that I backed him up, I never had to enter a game for his injury, which, I mean,
that's amazing.
I've had to do it multiple times other places, oddly enough, for 2 other Patriots guys, Jacoby and Jimmy this past year. But in all the years that I backed him up, all the big hits that I saw, I remember him taking a hit my rookie year or second year by Elvis Dumervil. There's a great clip where he's,
I know exactly.
I'm like, my chin strap. I mean, he got up and he talks about it. He's like, I took pride in showing people that they weren't going to hurt me. And I mean, you go to the AFC Championship game in 2017 when his thumb gets all messed up. I'm like, I'm playing this game. There's no way. I just saw like his hand split open. There's no way he's playing. And sure enough, he wears his red gloves out there, and we kind of mess with the media a little bit. But he, through the work and commitment he had to play, he played.
But you mentioned it, so let's bring that up right there. At that point in time, was that Wednesday of the week or Thursday of the week? Was it Friday? I mean,
it was Wednesday.
Okay,
because I ended up practicing all day Thursday,
my point
all day
is,
Friday. Yeah,
you're talking about not getting any reps. You had reps,
yeah.
At least mentally at that point in time. You wouldn't have been surprised if Josh comes up to you and goes, "By the way, you're up."
I fully expected to play.
Right.
Until I would say Sunday morning. And that was I had just gotten back like 7 weeks prior to that.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, well, you were the starting quarterback in San Francisco at the beginning of the year. This is where you wanted to be. You're a starting quarterback in the NFL. Like, this was your goal anyway. So, and I'll never forget, like, that happening and everybody kind of just standing around. And I'm like, all right, come on. Like, we got to move on. Like, I got to practice. And I was the only quarterback, so I had to do every rep on offense and every rep on scout team the remainder of the week. And, I just remember having so much confidence in the guys around me that I was like, I feel good. I know the plan really well, and I'll be ready to go if need be. But sure enough, Sunday morning rolls around, and he put some, kinesio tape on it. And I think the biggest thing was, could he take a snap? And once he figured out that he was going to, power through that, I mean, some of the plays he made in that game were incredible.
How's the winning touchdown?
The one
pass?
to Amendola down the middle of the field. I mean, to throw that with the injury that he had in his thumb, I don't even know how you physically do that.
How about the game winner on the back of the line? There's only one place the ball can go.
That's right.
So in that situation, Brian, like at that point in time, you've seen him do all these different things. The Miami game your rookie year. Are you beyond amazed at that point, or you just goes, oh yeah, that's Tom. I mean,
there was really 3 times in my career where I felt like that was going to be the case. So we talked about the 2, and then the one, I think it was in 2018 after we lost to Tennessee. He hurt his knee at the end of that game, and I didn't really know the extent. It was the week of Thanksgiving, and I think we had like for whatever reason, we had Thanksgiving off, but we practiced on Wednesday, and he practiced the whole day Wednesday, and so I'm like, all right, he's good. And then I'll never forget like cooking my turkey outside. I had like a big green egg. I'm smoking the turkey for the first time. He calls me like, hey babe, I don't think I'm gonna be able to. I don't think I'm gonna be able to play Sunday. I'm like, what are you talking about? You just practiced the whole day. He's like, yeah, this knee really like swole up on me, and I'm gonna see what Alex can do. But he's like, I'm as a friend, like I'm just telling you, be ready to go.
That's interesting.
So I remember being like, all right, where's the playbook? Like we got to put the extra time in, and that was a Sunday morning where me, Josh, and Bill are all waiting for Tom to come down to be like, are you gonna go? What is it? And in my mind, I'm like, if he's walking down here, he's gonna say I'm gonna play. But there was really 3 times in my career where I was like, all right, you're probably gonna have to play. And then sure enough, it came to the time for him to play, and he was good to go.
Did you F up the turkey?
It got probably a little overcooked. I'm not gonna lie.
oh.
Yeah.
As he's looking through the playbook.
That's right.
So, how about some of the times that you did get to play? Some of the memories of that. Do you remember the first game? I mean, I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
The first time you got in.
Well, that was the snow game in October against the Titans, which they had the Oilers uniforms
Sweet
on.
unis.
Oh, I mean that was one of
the great uni games of all time.
Yeah, and I had just gotten like engaged to my wife that week, and my birthday was a few weeks. It was October was a great month, my rookie year.
That's
and
awesome.
so we were killing those guys, and I got to go in, and it was in the snow, and that's for me growing up in the north, like in Cleveland. When it snowed, you went outside to play football in the backyard because you can get tackled. It's not going to hurt. And so to me, that was kind of like the welcome to the NFL moment. Like, here I am. I'm playing in a game. It's snowing. I scored a touchdown on a quarterback sneak. And, so I'll never forget that. And then really the next time I really played like an extended amount of time was the following year. I think it was the last game of the year against Miami.
Who'd you throw the touchdown pass
Brandon
to?
Tate.
There you go.
Yeah, and got crushed. I got crushed on the play. They actually called it roughing the passer play. But I was kind of happy my first touchdown was like a bomb. You know what I mean?
Do you show that one to your kids and say, hey, why don't you look at Dad, stay in the pocket here and get
that route,
get his head kicked in, but I threw the touchdown pass.
That was one of the routes that we called a pistol route that they talked about in the Dynasty with Randy. When Randy came, he's like, listen, I'm just going to go where the open place is. And so, I got to go in, and they call it pistol route, and it's like you can go either way, and you're only supposed to make like one cut and then go the opposite. And Brandon's like, boom, boom. So I'm like, and then finally I see which way he's going, and I launched it, and that was a pretty good feeling to throw a 50-yard touchdown pass for your first touchdown pass.
In 11, I think you attempted one pass.
Yeah, it was Gronk's record.
So let's let the fans know about what the story, because I don't necessarily remember that. Maybe that's just because I'm old and the passage of time.
Yeah.
But I don't
to go with the CTE.
No, but like that at the time that was a big deal.
Yeah, so that was the last game of the season. It was Gronk and Jimmy Graham, I think, were kind of battling like for the yardage record, right, for tight ends for a season, I think. And they were kind of going back and forth, and their game ended, and I think we realized on the sideline that Jimmy Graham had like 4 yards more than Rob. So we go in, and I
don't follow these things, Matt.
Right. So I remember going in, we were just going to run the clock out, and then Bill grabs me. He's like, look, Gronk needs like 5 yards to break the record. So, like, we'll just put him outside and throw a hitch. Well, like, a hitch is like a 5-6 yard route, catch the ball. But we have a conversion if they press you. So, like, if the guy comes up and press, you really can't run a hitch. So he runs a fade. And to be honest with you, I kind of forgot that because I was like, all right, I'm going to take a 3-step drop. I'm going to throw a 5-yard hitch. I don't even know if I looked out there. And I drop back, and I'm like, oh, my God, he's running a go route. And so I remember lofting the ball up to him. He gets the record, and then it was kind of questionable whether his feet were inbounds, so we had to run like a quick play to make sure that it sat. So that was a pretty cool memory too.
I love those kinds of things though, because they're always telling us like, stats are great.
Yeah. Well, that game, that game was in the bag, and I think that meant a lot to obviously Rob, but also to Bill. Like, that's a huge record to break, and Rob will always joke. I threw him that pass to break that record, but I also threw him his first touchdown pass, although it was in a preseason game in Atlanta that year.
Remember
his rookie
it?
year. So,
yeah.
You do?
That's
I'm
pretty
impressed.
impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember, because, I mean, like, I can only imagine what you guys thought on the field. Paul talked about this a little bit earlier.
That was before I was part of the preseason broadcast.
But the fact, like, all of a sudden these new weapons come in.
Yeah.
We've got to revitalize the offense. We need to do more.
Yep.
I mean, you guys must have, like, oh my goodness, they're rookies, they're green and everything like that. But the ability to see what these guys could do in the field was certainly eye-opening.
It's funny.
At a pretty
I do
early
remember
time.
Gronk dragging some guys against the Rams. I think.
Yeah, that was here. That
Yes.
was, yep.
Into the end, and I remember thinking that kind of stuff. I don't remember the.
Right.
Sorry,
Well, I think
Brian.
I think we all noticed. I think we all realized, like, oh my God, these guys. I mean, you had never really seen a pair like this before, and I think Tom realized it early. And I know Rob jokes like he thought Tom hated him, but Tom would have those guys stay after practice, and we would throw to them, and we would have Dane Fletcher. I don't know if you guys remember.
Oh yeah,
Dane.
sure.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, Dane, can you come cover these guys? Because we don't just want to throw routes on air. I mean, and we'd be like, all right, Dane, play cover 5, which is like inside leverage 2-man. And then we just run out-breaking routes to teach them, like, when you get this coverage, you got to win your leverage. And so Dane was like a little puppy dog. He'd be like, all right, you want to cover again? And he'd be covering both guys back to back. But, those were, moments where I looked at, like, Tom was building chemistry with these young guys. And then the season rolled around, and I think it showed, like, I don't think anybody in the league expected, this matchup nightmare, because the reality was, and looking back, I know more now, but as a second-year player, you don't understand, like, the matchups that it created on teams. It was, usually you put 2 tight ends in a game, the defense is going to put 3 linebackers in a game and 4 DBs. Well, once they realized we were throwing with these guys, now they're putting 2 linebackers in the game and 5 DBs. And we were like, well, screw it. If they do that, we're just going to run the ball, because both of them were great blockers.
Right.
And it was just constant mismatch. Like, okay, we put that, we called it Detroit personnel, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, and a halfback. You put that personnel on the field, and you just wait to see what the defense does. All right, did they put regular defense, which is like the 4 down linemen, the 3 linebackers, and the 4 DBs? All right, well, now we're going to spread them out. We're going to throw it, because one of those linebackers is going to have to cover one of these tight ends. And so we'd put, Rob on these seam routes, Aaron would be on these little routes underneath, and it became a mismatch nightmare. And then immediately when they would sub in the nickel defense, they take a linebacker out. Now we would just put them down and run, we call it outside zone, with the fullback / tight end blocking the extra linebacker, which is now a DB, and they would just block till the cows came home. And I think that was the unique part of it, was they were both great pass catchers, but they both could block. I mean, just as well as, any other tight end in the league.
Paul, you've historically always talked about the games that the Patriots should win that they weren't in, but one of the great what-ifs that I don't think gets a lot of attention here in New England is on that 11 team. What if Gronkowski doesn't get hurt in the AFC Championship game?
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm surprised, because I don't think that was, no disrespect, a great Patriots team. Was stunned that they were actually favored against the Giants, who beat you in Foxborough that year.
Yep.
But a healthy Gronk with a healthy Welker and a healthy Hernandez, that game was so close that a healthy Gronk, I think, don't you think?
Yeah, I totally do. And to your point, like, all the stuff that Brian's talking about offensively was why that team was in the Super Bowl. It was one of the weaker Patriots defenses,
Yes.
certainly of any of the Super Bowl era.
Right.
And you have to think, if you have Gronk, and it took the Giants a little while to figure out he wasn't himself.
Right.
I think you even hear that on one of the mic'd ups. He's just a decoy out there. If Rob is healthy, how does that? How different does that?
I mean, I look at Rob as clearly, to me, having played with him, maybe I'm a little biased, but the greatest tight end of all time. Not only because of his size, speed, and when you think of tight ends' ability to run routes and catch, but because he was such a great blocker, the teams had to honor that. And I think that's what made him so dynamic. Was, we look at Travis Kelce today, phenomenal tight end,
Great
but
player.
Really Travis isn't blocking anybody.
No.
Rob would block like he was the right tackle. And so that allowed you to do so many things that you could put 11 personnel in the game, but really it was like, 11 personnel is 1 tight end, 3 receivers, and a halfback. But really you're still kind of in, a fullback mentality, tight end mentality, blocking, and you could run, which back then a lot of teams weren't running the ball from those formations. And so Rob, really changed the game in that matter, because he was a lineman who was the premier pass catcher at the same time. So, him being healthy in that game and being able to threaten their defense with the vertical passing game, probably would have helped. I never like to look back and say what if, because there's so many plays in the game, so many players playing, but Rob obviously was a critical part of that team.
No question. So you go to Cleveland in 12, right?
Yep. 13.
Okay.
Yep.
At some point in time, as you're apprenticing under Tom, you're learning all this stuff. It's got to be in your mind. It's time for me to see if I can start.
Sure.
Here gets your opportunity to do that. We're talking about wouldas and shouldas and stuff like that as far as Raw
Yeah.
in that Super Bowl. Do you think at all about wouldas and shouldas? You guys were rolling a little bit
Yeah.
before the Pittsburgh game.
Yep.
Does that one come? Geez, if I don't get hurt,
Yeah.
I wonder if.
Yeah, that's probably when I look back at my career, and even more so being a Cleveland kid who grew up and getting finally a chance. Like you said, back up Tom for 3 years, go to a Super Bowl, don't win the Super Bowl. Get released the next year out of football for 10 weeks, and then now here I am on my hometown team, get a chance to start, win 2 games, Thursday night game, big game. There's a lot of hype and tear my ACL. I think that's probably, if I look back at, like, if I could say there's one huge what if. Now, granted, I end up rehabbing and coming back and being the starter again there the next year. But, you just never, like, our coaches got fired after that year because we didn't win another game. And, so for me, that's probably, like, when I look back, like, we talk about, like, branch realities and multiverse and all that stuff, like maybe somewhere in some reality I didn't get hurt and end up staying there and maybe don't go to 9 different teams, but if everything works out for a reason, if I was still playing there, then I wouldn't have came back here in 17 and won a Super Bowl. So
what do you consider your best season?
Oddly enough, me playing, when statistically looking, you probably look at Houston as my best year. It was the I only ended up playing like 9 full games due to injury and actually getting benched.
19 touchdowns?
Yeah, and so that was great, but I look at the stretch I had in Chicago, and that was with a guy, offensive coordinator Dal Loggins, who had a little influence from this tree, the Patriots tree, but also he was with me in Cleveland with Kyle Shanahan, and he kind of melded those two systems together. And I think I had 4 or 5 games in a row, 300 yards passing, at least 2 touchdowns in every game. And then, of course, again, of what if break my forearm on a Thursday night game. Those Thursday night games weren't very kind to
the
me.
injuries. There's no injury problems on Thursday
nothing
night.
to see here. We're going to change the kickoff, Matt. That's going to be the secret sauce.
So that was probably my best stretch. I think statistically, Houston was a crazy year because I start week 1, and then somehow after battling for the job on Hard Knocks, I get benched for Ryan Mallett, and then it doesn't work out with him. I come back in, we go to the playoffs, and then self-admittedly play like the worst game of my entire athletic career, going back to like first grade. It was just one of those days things weren't working, and then that was it. And I think that's the reality of like a guy like me in the NFL. You come in undrafted, you don't have a lot of hype behind you, and anytime you falter, they're like, well, that's why. And so I'm thankful that I was able to have the career I have. But, if you're a first-round pick, you're going to get multiple opportunities because that's why you were a first-round pick. Right. So, that's just the way the cookie crumbles, and you learn how to work the business side of it. But, probably Houston was probably my best year, which that was reuniting with Bill O'Brien and this system and knowing, kind of that.
Brian, you talked earlier about parent. Your son's in 7th grade, maybe has a little bit more of a realization about what it was that you were doing, what you were going through. Just from a parenting and a teaching standpoint, the fact that you were in Pittsburgh, Arizona, San Francisco, Chicago, 3 tours with New England, like, is that a good teachable moment for your kids? Like, who knows what they're going to do? But you know what? Better be resilient in life, babe.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is what I try to relay to them is, you said resiliency, dealing with adversity. And look, I know I'm talking about playing in the NFL. I know that people have a lot of different, things that they deal with. But
military brats.
Right. Those are, but my kids, they've lived in.
There might as well be a military brat.
Right. So, but I think, it teaches you that, things aren't always going to go your way in life. And you have to figure out how to, work your way through those times. And, I was always grateful that I had the opportunity to come back here because after being in all those places, I craved the culture of New England. I craved the tough, we're going to do everything we can to win. And sure, were there days that were miserable that we all kind of came in after practice and was like, God, like, I don't want to go to this meeting. Yeah, but I also, after being on teams that, it was fun on Wednesday, it was fun on Thursday, it was fun on Friday, but Sunday rolled around and you got your butt kicked. Like, I was thankful to come back to this culture and be around guys that, I had kind of started my career with, and now they had become like the leaders of the team, like the McCourties, obviously Tom was still here, but Julian, Hightower, guys like that, David Andrews, guys who, they got it, and I was excited to be back. So, you never know what path you're going to take, and everyone always jokes like success is kind of like always upward. It's up and it's down, and so just like my career, there's highs and lows, and I wouldn't change a thing. I think along the way, I always tell my agent this, like, at every fork in the road, I always felt like we made the right decision.
That's great. I hope I am not screwing this up. One more kid question. When you were traded back here, was that Halloween?
It was Halloween night. I remember being
so
there.
You got. This isn't. I mean, you want to talk about we're dads. You remember going out trick or treating with your kids. Okay, he's in the NFL. It's a little bit different, but at the end of the day, he's still a dad.
Yeah.
You're traded back to. Hey, we're going back to New England. This is great. Tell us a story.
So I remember leaving the facilities in San Francisco that day, and I was like, all right, see you tomorrow. Kyle, see you tomorrow. And I think it might have been the day before Halloween because we had to go get the costume. And so I got home, took my son to like the Spirit Halloween store, get his costume, get to the checkout line, get to the car. And Kyle calls me back, and he's like, hey, we're going to trade you back to New England. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, they offered to trade us Jimmy, and as part of the deal, like they need a backup quarterback. So like, we're going to trade you back to New England. And I just remember being in shock because I thought I'd seen it all at that point, but I'd never been a part of a trade. And the way it worked out, it wasn't like they agreed to release me and I could sign here, and because of comp picks and things like that. But I remember having to like go home and like break that to my wife because we had moved, but we had never moved in the middle of the season. And I was like, all right, so I'm going to have to go to New England on Tuesday night. And then I remember it was the bye week here, so I practiced. Stayed an extra day, met with Jerry Shaplinski, who was the quarterback coach, met with Josh a little bit. All the players went to their, whatever they were doing for the bye week. I flew back to California. Got the biggest suitcase I could because, by the way, Bill's like, hey, we're playing in Mexico City in 2 weeks, so I hope you have a passport. And
did you?
Yeah, I did. And so I packed as much stuff as I could, took the red eye on Saturday night, came here Sunday, landed Sunday morning, went and saw 3 different houses, picked one, went and toured a school, ended up being the school that my kids still go to this day. And, it was a whirlwind, week. But look, like I said, I know that we're privileged. This is the NFL, so I'm not comparing it to other people's situations. But that was a week that took a huge toll on my family and my wife. And I couldn't have done the career that I had without her and her support. And thankfully we met when we were in high school. So we had a strong foundation but in a way it made our kids, kind of mature and deal. And so my son, we went out to Vegas last year, and he goes to baseball practice with a bunch of kids that he doesn't know. And by the end, they're all laughing, and he's immediately, so he knows how to adapt. And so there's positives and negatives to all sides of it.
Did you get to trick or treat?
No. Well, I remember being like waiting for the deal to be worked out, and Bill calls me. He's like, look, are you going to get here or what? And I'm like, Bill, I'm just waiting for like the airline ticket. I got a bag packed in my car. I was at the kids' like Halloween party at school, and I'm like, I'm just waiting for like the ticket.
That's
so
funny.
I'm not going to ask you the question about the Eagles Super Bowl in 2017. We'll gloss over that.
Well, I don't think anyone knows anyways. So.
Okay. So in 2018, obviously you're part of your championship season.
Yep.
For you, I want to go before that to the Kansas City game in the AFC Championship game, and just what it was like. Because for Matt and I, again, there's that same theme of us being around.
Sure.
We've both been around for all of these Super Bowls, so we've gotten a chance. That one stands out for us. That Kansas City AFC Championship game was one of the greatest games that I've seen, and I just want to know what it was like from your perspective, watching that overtime drive.
Yeah,
and all that drama.
I think that's my favorite game as a Patriot ever.
Love to hear that.
Because in a way, looking back, that really was the Super Bowl. In my opinion, I know we had to go the next week and beat the Rams, and the defense played an incredible game. But to go into Kansas City, it's like, -5 degrees. No one's given us a chance to win. And the effort that everybody put in that week to that game to then get, like you said, get to this overtime win, I think, you see it on our faces running on the field. I think it was kind of a true, like, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, like a true, like, us against the world moment. No one was there to support us other than the guys on that sideline. No one everyone in the stands, wanted us to lose. Really, everybody kind of wanted this changing of the guard. Here's Mahomes. They're going to beat the Patriots. And it was kind of like against all odds type thing. And so fittingly comes down to this 2-minute drive where here's Tom and the famous, Julian quote, "You're too old," at his age, and methodically drives us down and win with a touchdown. I mean, it's to me it was like the ultimate team win. And when I always think of my time with the Patriots, it was always the best teams that I've been on. And I'm not just saying because we were the most talented or had the best coaching staff. I'm talking about the group of men that were in the room, and we were so close-knit as a team. And like I said, I think you see that when you see on the field. And I think I'm right behind Kyle Van Noy, and Tom's jumping into Kyle's arms. And it was like this moment, like we have to go win the next week, because this game was so important and so critical to that, and the belief that it gave, I think, everybody in that team.
And look, fortunately for the rules and everything like that, coin toss, you win, you're getting the ball. As you're sitting there and you're seeing, the personnel, everything like that, is there any doubt in your mind you guys are going down and scoring at that point in time?
It was kind of like it was kind of like a back and forth.
It
so
was
you
a back and forth.
You were just hoping you got the ball, and I think at that point, it was like the thing that I always look back was I couldn't believe that they couldn't cover Julian, because really we ran the same play from both sides, and we had this little motion and you were like, when he hit those two plays, you're like, man, we're in the driver's seat. We just got to go and not make any mistakes. And I think we ended up running with Rex for a touchdown.
Yep.
So,
but 3 3rd and 10s,
right?
And two to Jules and one to Gronk.
It was a play called China, and it meant like a shoot and an in, the CH for shoot and an in, and I'm like, all right, well, it worked once. And usually, sometimes as a quarterback, you kind of like get to the point where like, all right, we just ran that play. Like, there's no way it's going to work again. And, that was just Tom basically, dropping back, seeing the coverage, and here comes Julian, several times. I don't know if Hogan had a great catch on that drive, but
I think at the end of regulation.
Yeah, he had a great catch in regulation. Yeah.
It was kind of a similar play, but clearly, this is the greatness of Tom and Josh and all those guys working together. They were having trouble covering the middle of the field. And so just continue to expose it until they fix it. And, they didn't fix it in time. And luckily for us, it was able to take us down and win that game.
So Paul brings up, and I think a lot of Patriot fans would agree, spoiled, yes, first world problems, what's the best game? Interesting to hear that you say that, but you got to go and you got to beat the Rams in Atlanta. And I'm not sure that fans quite know the role that you played that week and your experience with McVay and that system. Talk a little bit about how you saw your role that week as getting ready to play the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, as a backup quarterback, you always prepare to play. We talked about that earlier, but the reality is, like, Tom's healthy. I mean, could something happen in the game? Yes, but for me, I always think, like, how can I, especially at this, the last game of the year, the Super Bowl, like, what am I going to do to contribute to the team to help them win? And because I was a veteran guy as a backup and had played in a lot of places, I always had great conversations with Devin and Jason and Hightower and Gilmore. And, when we would play a team that maybe it was a system that I was in, and I'm running the scout team, I'm like, hey, listen, this is how they're teaching these quarterbacks. This is what they're looking at. And I'll never forget, like, get into the hotel in Atlanta. And, you practice a week before you travel. And I'm like, all right, some of these plays are similar to what I ran with Kyle, who obviously influenced Sean. And I remember, being in the hotel room, I'm like, because you have to have an off day. Even though you're traveling there for the Super Bowl, it's an off day, and, your family's not there yet. And so you kind of hunker down in the hotel. And I saw a thing on, like, Yahoo. It's like, they did like a Hard Knocks show, but it was on Amazon. And here's like some clips from the year that the Rams did, mic'd up. And I'm listening to like the play calls that they have on these clips from training camp. And I'm like, well, I know that play. I've run that play before. And as the week went on, I kept watching more and more of their film and being like, I know the offense that they're going to run, and having meetings with Bill and Matt. And was Matt still there, or was it Flo?
It's Flo.
Yeah. And being like, listen, I know, they don't really have an answer for this. They don't really have, if you bring this pressure, they have to throw hot, things like that. And, so I took a lot of pride in that. And one of my proudest moments was after the Super Bowl, Devin and Jason kind of talking that to the media and being like, we were on it. We had a great feeling because Brian gave us a great look. He sat there and talked about, their offensive system. And, that was a way for me to feel like I actually contributed in some way, because I never stepped on the field. But, you got to do whatever you can to help the team win. So, something that I was proud of and fortunate enough having been in those systems, I could relate that to those guys.
So when you show your kids your Super Bowl ring,
Yeah.
and your kid goes, "Oh, that's a nice ring, Dad, but you didn't play." Well, hold on for a second.
That's
You're
the
right,
one.
I didn't play.
Yeah, that's the one I came up with a defensive game plan.
However, and like that's the power of team,
Right.
isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I would always say about the Patriots. We always had the best team, and I'm talking about relationships, closeness. There's nothing ever been comparable to the locker room that I had, especially as I got older. I mean, it was great as a young guy, but as an older player, you appreciate it even more. And they did a great job in 17, 18, 19. We did these things in the off season called like the team of teams, and it was a way for you to bond with other players on the team. And so there'd be like 2 offensive players, 2 defensive players, maybe a special teams player, a coach, a trainer, a football ops guy, and we did these like challenges. So like we'd have field day out on the field, and it'd be like the egg toss or the frisbee throw or a sack race. Or one day we went down to Fenway.
I remember
and
that
we did
day.
this great like baseball challenge, and one day we did paintballing, and it was a way for you to connect with guys that you're not always sitting there every day with in the meetings. And that's where I felt like you had this closeness. I'd go in and sit with the DBs at lunch one day, and the next day I'd sit with the linemen, and you had these relationships with guys where, in all honesty, it was almost closer than some of the college teams where you're spending all this time with these guys, because we all go home to our families. But when you came in here, it was like your second family, and true, and I'm not just saying that like as cliche.
Yeah, see, he glossed over that. You see what he did there? Now, before the whole thing, Bill doesn't deserve the credit for that.
Right.
That he gets.
Right.
It's this guy.
Right.
When you came back again, third time in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
was there a hint of disappointment when they end up signing Cam?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, that whole scenario. So in 2019, Bill comes to me. Obviously, that was Stidham's rookie year, and he says, "Look, like we got to manage this roster a little bit. Are you okay with like kind of waiting? We'll let you go and we'll re-sign you after the first week." And I was like, "Sure." Like I love being a part of this organization, and all of a sudden my agent calls me. He's like, "Hey, Indianapolis is offering you a great deal," and I was like, I felt torn, but it was an opportunity that I looked at like in the long run. This will
It's pretty good money.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great deal, and so in a way, I kind of thought like I never really left. So like third stint, I was gone for 4 months, and then I was right back. And with Tom moving on, I'm like, wow, this is my opportunity. And so I remember training like the hardest, and this was during COVID, and trying to train on your own and trying to be as prepared as I could. And so obviously I was disappointed when they signed Cam, because that was like something I had always dreamt of. I had started for all these other teams, but I had never really played for the Patriots, the one team that I kind of consider myself. That was the team that was my team. So it was disappointing, but like I said, it's not something that I had never lived through before, and you try to navigate it the best you can.
I mean, obviously, people will look at when Tom left, and there's clearly a void on the field. You saw some of the ups and downs that happened after that. It wasn't just on the field where that void was felt. I assume that was felt in the locker room. And it probably was difficult and challenging for someone like you. But Paul mentioned this earlier. You saw when things were going really well. Mm-hmm. So would Devin, so would Matt, people like that. When things aren't going well, and you guys are some of the leaders and everything, like how do you try to sit there and recapture what is the right way to do things? What winning football is, and yet that's not happening on the field.
Yeah.
That had to be just tremendously frustrating.
It was, and I think 2020 was such a unique situation because of the COVID year, because of like what you were allowed to do. Obviously, Cam comes in late, and there's no real training camp, and it was an odd year all the way around. And so, next year it was like, okay, we're getting back to like what, at least to me, felt similar to what it was. Obviously, it was different without Tom. Routine, and then Matt comes in, and I remember thinking like, God, they have to be like telling the guy like what to do out here at practice, because he was learning so quickly that I was like, I've never seen a rookie pick up a system like this, and it became pretty apparent that he was going to be the starter. And I truly, my time with Cam was great. I came to, really know him and appreciate him for what he was, and he was hilarious, and he was great in meetings, and so I know like his time here was kind of, looked at like it wasn't really, a success, but he impacted a lot of guys, and there was things that Cam did and sayings that he would say that carried with us after even he was not here anymore. And so, I really enjoyed, and I've had a lot of experiences like that, like kind of these polarizing figures, Cam Newton, or when I was in Chicago with Jay Cutler, people were always like, well, what was that like? And I was like, I really enjoyed it because you got to see a personality of someone who from afar, you don't really know like what's the deal. And so being in a room with Cam for a year and a half, really, it was always made me smile. So that was kind of cool opportunity about that. But, you get to 2021 where, Mac ends up winning the job and you kind of get back to like what I thought was really, what we had always done, the Patriot way. And I mean, for lack of a better term, but there was also a new energy with some of the newer guys like Kendrick Bourne, Judon, Mills, Hunter Henry. And so it kind of was a new flavor. And really, that was one of my more enjoyable years playing here because it was kind of like, in a sense, of changing of the guard, but we were still playing good football.
So Cam was great with us, by the way.
Yeah, he was awesome.
He was. It was on field, obviously, probably not up to what he had become accustomed to.
And seemed like a good teammate.
Yeah,
he was
great.
great.
He was great to deal with.
We all joke about like the nicknames and stuff, and like some of those nicknames lasted with guys well past when Cam was gone. He was a great teammate and a great guy.
So you got a chance to play again the following year. Was it 22?
20 when I got
22
against Green Bay. Yeah.
So again, it's like this kind of blessing and curse at the same time. Great career, and every time you sort of get a chance to get in the spotlight, something happens. It just has to be ridiculously
Yeah, that was rough. I
frustrating.
mean, I remember being emotional about that one because it was like, I got a chance to play in 2020, but that was the whole like COVID.
That was a mess week.
Found out on
Kansas
Saturday,
City.
then the game got pushed
Kansas
back,
City
and
game.
we flew in on the day of, and not making excuses. It was odd. It was one of the most odd experiences I ever had. And so this time in 2022, here it is, like Mac's hurt, you're going to play full week of practice, have a really good drive to start the game, things are going well, and then boom, you're out. And that was, to me, was like, man, that was probably my last chance to really play for the team that I love. And so that was a tough one.
Last one for me here, Brian, as I hear you say that, the team that I love, and we talked about, a little bit about some of the other places that you went and everything like that. We call this the Pats from the Past podcast. Do you identify as a Patriot?
Yeah, 100%. I was kind of thinking, I figured you'd ask me this on it, so I was thinking, I was here some form or fashion 10 years out of my 15, which is kind of crazy to think when you hear like, oh, he was on this many teams. But, 09 to 12 end of training camp, and then 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. I mean, so my kids are from here. We've kind of made this our home. And, when I look at my career, although I played the least on this team, I also kind of look at myself like that's who I am. And I had a lot of great memories other places, but I've had the best memories here.
So I do want to ask you about coming off the bench last year, in Vegas and what that was like to sort of rally the troops after Jimmy went down.
Yeah, that was I'm thinking to myself, of all the times to get thrust into a game, this is the one. And Jimmy got hurt like right before halftime and kind of toughed it out a little bit. And I'm like, oh, kind of similar. Like he got hurt, but then he went back out. He played a few snaps. They're like, oh, he's probably okay. And then they take him in. They're like, listen, we got to take him to the hospital. I'm like, all right, here we go. And of all teams to go against, I'm like, well, I know this team. I know this defense. And I know our offense really well. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to go out there.
And I'm throwing a bomb.
Well, that play we developed against our defense in training camp a few years because there was a lot of times where we call a play, and Devin had seen it so many times that they would teach him to rob the guy which was Julian at the time, our number 3 receiver running a Speedo. And so I'm like, oh, God, here we go. This is the play. And we made adjustment to put the outside guy on a deep route in case they did that. So I remember getting the snap. I kind of knew that down a distance it could be that defense. And all I watched was Peppers. And as soon as he went down, I don't even know if I looked to Trey, who I was throwing the ball to. I'm like, I know that area of the field is exposed. And sure enough, that kind of got the jitters out. And then you just go play football. And then, as the game's going on, I'm realizing, like, just don't screw it up. I mean, we're winning. We're kicking some field goals. Our defense is doing pretty well. And but I remember the feeling I had after that game of, like, just bittersweet, because I remember going up to my team, the guys that I love, the guys that I consider brothers, and I could just see how dejected they were. I knew, based on staying in touch with them, how tough of a year it was. And so I was elated because it was kind of vindication for me to come back and beat the team after being told basically to go retire. And I felt great, but it hurt my heart to see these, like, I'll never forget David Andrews just being like exhausted and beaten down, or Slater and all those guys. And so it was kind of like a mixed emotions. And looking back, I should have just, been done after that game and been like, all right, I did my part, because the rest of the year for us was downhill. But it's something that, it goes down as like as a great memory, but also like a bittersweet one too.
I mean, he said it. We're professional athletes. I'm not looking for anything special or anything like that. But let's not forget, they're human beings too.
Yeah.
They're human beings. And to hear like, wow, this is great for me individually. Oh, shoot. These are my guys, and they're going through a tough time, and I just helped extend that tough time a little bit, Really interesting. Brian, thanks for the time. It's great catching up.
Thanks for having me. You
All
guys
right?
too.
Thanks, Brian.